So this last 5 years was suicide attempts, cancer twice, 20 times in jail, 6 rehabs, hospital stays, countless number of hospital stays, MRSA in my elbow. I got held captive by a gang because I owed them money for cocaine for 48 hours.
This is the story of all stories. This is incredible. I did not expect this.
Welcome to Going Within, the podcast where I, David Naylor, and our guests dive deep, sharing our transformative journeys with psychedelic therapy and other awakening experiences. Join us as we explore the life-changing potential of going within and listening to inspiring stories of transformation from various life experiences and ceremonies. Now, let's go within.
Sam Gibbs Morris is a thought leader, speaker, author, men's retreat facilitator, spiritual teacher, and the Hippie Kowboy. That is trademarked, by the way. For over 4 decades, Sam sought external solutions, hoping that others in the world would save him. It was only through deep healing and radical self-ownership that he discovered his true identity and purpose. Sam has been diagnosed with cancer 3 different times, and it's just mind-blowing to actually see that once he was diagnosed with this 3rd time, he went to an ayahuasca journey and had his cancer diagnosis completely removed. I'm so excited for you guys to hear this. Sam, it's great to have you on.
David, thank you so much. Driving over here, I was like, this one, I'm exceptionally excited about this one.
Yeah. Any chance to go in with another brother who also has had the type of healing and awakening and expansion and now that are in their full-on creation, I'm excited about.
Yeah.
It's like, it's like a reflection.
I mean, absolutely. It's great to be here.
Yeah, man.
Looking forward to that too.
I think, right now, currently, you're a teacher, you're a healer, you're a thought leader, you're a space holder, you're a brother, you're a son, you're a partner, you're a king, you're a sage, you're a warrior, you're a magician. Like you're tapping in multidimensionally to who you are.
Yeah.
But it didn't necessarily just happen overnight.
No.
Tell me a little bit about just kind of highlight your story of how you came into your dark night of the soul, your crisis that began this healing journey. Like, when was that pivot point for you?
It's funny. I've thought about this, and I've always tried to put markers on it, and I've landed on that. Like, this whole thing started for me the day I was born.
Wow.
Coming into the world with severe breathing problems and asthma and allergies, and then for the first 10 or 15 years of my life, I had this tendency to choke on my food. So there was a Heimlich maneuver. The actual meat stuck in my throat, and so there was this complicated relationship with breath, a basic human need that I had. And so looking back, there's been these moments in time where I thought I knew something, and it was and it said, no, that's not what's true. What you think you know is not true. And that real opening started for me stepping into recovery. And being in the rooms of recovery, Alcoholics Anonymous or other recovery rooms and rehabs, and hearing stories of other people that had the sexual, physical, verbal abuse, that had the alcohol home, that had the parents that were separated and fighting, that had all these typical alcoholic kind of markers. I'm sitting in these rooms and I'm like, don't have any of that. As far as I know, in this moment, my childhood was amazing. I was skiing every winter, ski racer, played tennis and golf every summer. We'd go on trips. There was abundance of love in the house. The parents were never alcoholic or abusive or anything like that. And so I'm just like, why am I here? Why did I spend the last 18 years battling with this drug and alcohol thing when I have nothing that would say you should have this? Or you should experience this.
When did you start using drugs and alcohol?
I was late to the party.
Okay.
So I was a tennis player growing up. So having that experience of being super sick as a kid, I felt very separate from my peers and social anxiety. I didn't like going to parties because there was bullying happening, and just the witnessing of these kids get to do this and I don't was hard for me to handle. So I gravitated towards tennis, golf, skiing, these individual sports. And tennis was the one I was legit on the path to be on the pro tour. That was it. I was training like it. I was being coached like it. It was going to happen. And that really, for me, was the only priority in life. And so all through college, that was priority. I would travel around New England playing tennis tournaments in Connecticut and Massachusetts and Rhode Island. And so I never put the party or the drugs and alcohol, not really even on my radar. And then my senior year, summer after my senior year, I smoked weed for the first time. And then when I got to college, I got drunk. I got drunk a couple times in high school, like 1 or 2. Nothing really significant. And then in college, still tennis was the priority, and drinking was always secondary. Like if I knew on a Friday night, if I had a match on Saturday, there was going to be no drinking because it was so important to me. Then, so when I did get drunk though, it was excessive.
Okay.
We can all call it normal college drinking. And
You went to the other side. You just flipped over, right? So it's like you on one side, you're so driven by this sport, which is a solo sport. It kept you isolated. Why was it so important to you? Why was tennis and that so important to you?
It's one of those things that I picked up a racket and I was good at it, and it was like, this is everything I need. And it allowed me, so team sports were really tough because I would have to stop in the middle of a basketball game and use my inhaler. Or, soccer. Soccer's big in Vermont, running around. Would always have to stop and use my inhaler. And so tennis allowed for those quick breaks. Like you play for 15, 20 seconds at a time and you get to stop. You switch sides every 3 games.
So is it safe to say it was part of your identity?
Oh my gosh. Like it was my identity. And it took my identity out of being that like shameful, sick, different than, broken kid into I'm a tennis player. And I got accolades for it.
It gave you something meaningful.
Gave me something meaningful.
And a sense of something. Which was your identity.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing that at some point the tennis career came to an end. Hence, your identity came to an end. Tell us about that experience.
That happened, I remember, I don't know what day it was, but I know it was spring of my senior year of college. My tennis coach calls me into the office, and I was on full tennis scholarship, playing number 1 for the team. And he calls me in his office and he said, Sam, you've been playing tennis every day since you were 7 years old. You're burnt out, and this is the end of you on the tennis team here. And you're more interested in the social aspect of this college experience than you are tennis. And this was, I was about to graduate college. And in the back of my head, I was shocked. And I was also like, you know what, he's right. Like, I don't really care about tennis anymore. I've had it. And in that moment, I felt, it was like when a girlfriend leaves and you have that moment of like, oh, this sucks. And
I'm free.
Like I don't have to, this isn't going to govern my life anymore.
Right.
And I was ready for that, I thought. And so that's when you hear a lot of athletes that'll have stories of being in sports and they'll start drinking, and the drinking will cause them to lose their sport.
Right.
For me, the sport upheld until the sport left, and then that gap, that void was filled with drugs and alcohol.
You dove in?
I went full athlete, full rock star.
That's what I was feeling.
Just flipped it.
And tell us, how long did you spend in that space for?
So that was 22, and until 38. So
wow, you had a long run.
Yeah, long run, and and again, this whole thing about like I'll say that's a marker I have.
Yeah.
And looking back, there was alcoholic tendencies.
Yeah.
Prior to that, so I would say it started when I was probably 18.
So you're talking almost 2 decades.
20 years
of being. So tell me a little bit about who was Sam Morris then. Like who? Yeah.
He was a lot of fun to be around.
Yeah.
Until he wasn't.
Yeah, for sure.
It was. It started off. This is the typical alcoholic story. It starts with a lot of good nights, and a couple bad ones.
Yeah.
Then it's about 50-50.
Yeah.
And then it's a lot of bad nights with a couple of ones, and then it's all bad. And we
could probably do a few podcasts just on those 20 years.
Oh my gosh!
Tell me just a couple highlights.
Yeah. So a couple highlights. It started it was graduate college. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, living there, working for a bank.
Yeah.
Making enough money, just living the life. A group of 5 guys in the house, and it was the party house.
Oh, wow.
And just living it up.
So you had some good times.
Good times, yeah. And there was some mornings I woke up like, oh shit, what happened last night? But I didn't think much of them because the next night my other friend would do that.
It was the rock star life. It was, the drugs, the women, the fun, the party.
All of it.
Okay.
And then that led me to get married. I met a girl and we got married, and then we moved down to South Florida.
Oh yeah.
The marriage was great. Like we were party buddies, and we got to South Florida, and it was just the 2 of us. And so I was like, I don't know if I like this person. And so I spent about 6 months wavering.
Oh.
And then finally I was like, it's just not working. Like I know that this is not the place for me. And I said to her one day, I just like this, I can't be married to you anymore. It's not fair to you. It's not fair to me. And I know this hurts, and it's not going to continue. And it was clean. It was like, there was no like a year and a half of ugly divorce, you know. She was hurt, but she accepted it. And so that was another kind of tipping point. Like the tennis thing was a tipping point. Now this, the marriage was one of those kind of governors on my life. And so now it's like, I'm 29 years old. I moved down to Miami. I'm doing commercial real estate. It's like 2004 to 2007 when the markets like just show up and they pay you.
Yep.
And I didn't have to do any brokering at all. And so it was Miami life, sex, drugs, and rock and roll on steroids.
Wow.
And
you're coming fresh off a divorce.
Fresh off a divorce, blowing off some steam, just living the life. And so from 30 to 33 was, again, like this was a real massive shift, because this is when, you know, the steady decline turns into
the market crashed.
Yeah, the market crashed and I crashed.
And you crashed with it.
Yeah. So at 33, that was 2007 now. Yeah. 2008 market crash. You know, I had to start like basically working. Like
starting to get real.
Yeah, and I had also built this lifestyle of like a lot of cocaine and a lot of alcohol, and forgot how to practice real estate. Really, if I'm being honest. Like,
so tell us about your darkest time now. Lead us to like the dark night of the soul time.
Yeah. So 33 to 38, those last 5 years, I was in and out of jail 20 plus times. Maybe I think 24 times. Oof. The longest was 8 nights.
Wow.
For a DUI, I had my dog with me in the car, and dog got taken to the pound. I got sent to jail. Ex-girlfriend had to fly from California to get the dog, which she now still has. You know, it was broken relationships. It was 2 more years in Miami, back to North Carolina, into rehab in Atlanta, back to Delray Beach to recover, more relapsing there, back to North Carolina. And then 2 months, the last 2 months were, I'd been sober for a year, 11 and a half months. And I was like, I'm going to reevaluate this at a year. 11 and a half was close enough in my book. And I had a beer at a football game. And the next thing I know, it got dark and I was 8 nights in jail and 2 months of just complete debauchery. Now, previous day, North Carolina was probably the darkest in 2009, where I got oral cancer twice. In 2009, 2011, and then right after oral cancer, I had a suicide attempt. Fell off a balcony, 35 feet, landed on the pavement below from a bar. Now, I didn't know that was a suicide attempt until a deep, deep sit with ayahuasca in 2021.
It revealed
this to me.
Yeah.
And it showed me also where previously in my life I had used asthma to try and commit suicide when I was 9 years old playing Little League. Yep. I said, and it was all shame fueled. So this last 5 years was suicide attempts, cancer twice, 20 times in jail, 6 rehabs, hospital stays, countless number of hospital stays, MRSA in my elbow. I got held captive by a gang because I owed them money for cocaine. Wow. For 48 hours.
This is the story of all stories. This is incredible. I did not expect this. Yeah. You know, I mean, I've known you in the community. We've had a couple of times where we've sat and chatted at places we've seen each other, but been looking forward to, this is one of the funnest things about this Within podcast. It's not just about finding out how people went within and with psychedelics and expanded and healed their life, but also I get to go within on each person's life and learn about them. It's been so fun to me. It's just juicy.
I bet.
So, all right, man. So, was there like a pivotal like burning bush experience? Because some people have the burning bush and then some people just have the gradual over time life change. Like, what was yours?
I would say that it was a more burning bush, but a little bit of both. Those last 5 years, you know, it went from like, I'm going to rehab to please the girlfriend back, to get the job back, to get the parents off my back.
Owning rehab centers, I saw a lot of that. Yeah. It was 95% relapse rate, revolving door, because nobody was ever choosing to heal themselves.
No, hardly anybody ever really chooses to be there. I thought I chose to be there, but the first time I went because like this,
it sucks being where I'm at.
It sucks having to answer all these questions to these people. I'm going to go hide out for 30 days.
Yeah, insurance will pay for it.
Yeah, it's cool. Like I need a timeout.
People will be happier with me.
Yeah. Let me just prove that.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm tired too.
Exactly. I feel a rest. Rehab's been a rest. Well, it's a good one. The rest of rehab.
Yeah. And so I did that, and then as that progressed, and then it was like that was in March of 2007. In the fall that year, I went to Cirque Lodge out in Utah.
Okay. Yeah.
And that was like more of a like, okay, this is helping. And I also, in the back of my head, like, there's no way I'm sober forever.
Right.
Because I need to go on dates and I need to like go to football games and festivals and I got to drink. And then after that one, it was about a 2-year break of just warm body existence, not really getting anywhere, just hanging out in Miami, not doing anything. And then finally in 2010, I was like, all right, I think I could probably use some help here. Like I know it's not working out, and I'm still scared as shit about life on the other side of this. But I went to a rehab in Atlanta, Talbot it's called, and I went there for 120 days. Wow. I got kicked out at 118 for having a relationship, a rehab relationship in the rehab. Yeah. So
I know about those.
There's a lot about like an uncompleted task there, about like so close to the end. And sure enough, like I got out of there and kept drinking, and then finally in 2012, I had a burning bush moment where I was sitting at my kitchen table. It was 4 a.m. My friends, crack dealers and drug dealers and cocaine friends had just left. Friends. Yeah, such close friends. I haven't talked to them since.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I know.
Yeah. And so they had all just left, and I'm sitting there in my house, and I'm actually supposed to move out of my house in 4 hours. And I had like $3,000 in the bank, and I blew it all on drugs and alcohol for 4 days, and I hadn't packed up a thing. So full house. Movers are coming in 4 hours, and I'm sitting there, and not only that, but for somehow the last 20 years of pain literally came knocking on my door and was like, hey, look at all this shit you've done. Look at all the pain you've caused your parents. Look at your dad's face. Look at your mom's face. Look at your sister's tears. And look at your body. And I was just like, oh. So I called up 911. I called my ex-girlfriend first, and I was like, I can't go on like this. Getting emotional thinking about it. I was just like, I can't continue this. I can't continue to cause everyone pain, and this has to stop, and I don't know how, and I don't know what I'm going to do, but this has to end now. And so I went to the psych ward for 7 days. Got right on a van from the hospital, went to a rehab in Michigan, which is a funny story, Scientology based. Yeah. And then went back to Circle Lodge in Utah for 4 months. Wow. And it was a burn the boats moment. Like I knew there was no going back.
Yeah. That is a burning bush experience, man.
Yeah.
I love hearing about the burning bush experiences, because I too have had a couple of those that just will get me emotional thinking about. And I mean, how old were you at that time?
38.
You were 38.
It was the week before Thanksgiving, so I spent Thanksgiving in the psych ward, my birthday in detox, Christmas, New Year's in rehab. Yeah, that's some a ceremony and initiation right there. Good. Wow. So, this is just a curiosity question that I have for you. Is like, what do you think that burning bush moment? What do you think was happening? Metaphysically, spiritually, like what was happening in that moment? Do you think it was just happenstance? Do you think that you were that chosen at that moment? Do you think it was all divine? I'm just curious. This is more of a curiosity. What do you think was happening during that time? At that moment, it was a very physical human experience of a lot of pain. Looking back, I remember I was like shaking, and that was what I know now. Is my higher self was like shedding, just like you're done. It was time. Like your hands are off the wheel now. It's time for you to like get your shit together, and then on the other side of it, I ended up in San Francisco, had a job in corporate for like 6 months, and was like, nah, this is not me anymore. I did recruiting, and I just was like making these calls, and I was like, and I left there, got mutually fired, and I started being a personal trainer, and like that was
doing what you love,
doing what I love, and I haven't worked a day since. And in that moment, that burning bush moment, it was just everything I had ever known, every story I'd ever told myself, every like mirror that I needed to see was going to be presented to me, and it's been mirrors for almost 11 years.
This is incredible. So, it's like when the snake is ready to shed the skin, or when that worm is ready to go into that chrysalis, or like sometimes that when that popcorn kernel, like whatever second it pops, right? Yeah. It happened for you. And, so how did, so you were in recovery. This is a big thing too, because, being in recovery myself, having gone to rehab at 17 and spending over a decade sober and working the steps and working several different types of recovery programs. when I found plant medicine, or when plant medicine began to call to me, it's really hard for me to grasp the fact that, like, wait a minute, am I going to take drugs? Like, this is a drug, psilocybin or ayahuasca or, wachuma, the cactus. But like, it was, my body was saying yes. I could feel this pull, but then my mind was like, I'm going to lose my sobriety date. What are people going to think? People aren't going to refer to my treatment centers anymore. Like, it was a lot of mind in the way, but eventually my intelligence and my body won out, and thank God I did, because it helped open up so much healing and awareness and consciousness that I ever even imagined. So, like, what was that like for you?
It was very similar.
It was.
Yeah, I mean, like, in that, I was 6 years in AA.
Yeah.
And I was in and out of AA for a long time. And looking back, there was always an element of me that didn't quite relate to the AA thing. Like, I refused to say I was an alcoholic for the first few years.
Same.
And because I couldn't, at first I just didn't want to admit it. And then I started saying it to fit in, because it was like, I think it was helpful to really look at that.
Yeah.
And at about 6 years, it was actually like 5 years that I was like, this is not it anymore for me. And then at that 5-year mark, my girlfriend broke up with me suddenly on January 12th, 2019.
Yeah, we know those dates.
Yeah. And I was like, well, I can't leave AA now because I'm free fall. And I need this community and support. And the universe is like, yeah, you need a little more time there. And so the move here to Austin was when I moved here, and I just didn't go to meetings. And because I knew it was coming, and I knew the plant medicines had been calling me for 3 years in sobriety. Yeah. Like looking at mushrooms and like talking to people about ayahuasca, getting invited to a few ayahuasca ceremonies, and be like,
same.
I can't do it.
Not right now. I know.
Yeah, I can't. Like I'm in AA. I'm sober. Like, oh, that's good for other people. And so finally, just like you, man, I had this like intense consciousness call that was like, this needs to happen now. And it was 2020, and I started with microdosing, and it was that conversation had gotten to the point where it was leaving AA was, I knew that I couldn't just leave AA and have a void in my life. Like, that was a huge part. And it was big. Community was a big part of it. And I still have friends that go to meetings every day. And they're really good friends, and they support my path. I support their path. And for me, it was knowing that I had, what was going to fill that void was this consciousness you talk about. This level of awareness and embodiment and deep spirituality that I just completely dove into when I left AA, and was like, hockey stick moment. Like, like you're on the trajectory and everything's good, and then a lot of AA, no disrespect at all, love it, did a lot for me.
Did a lot for me.
It stopped. It stopped working. And so getting onto the plant path, the microdosing led to a couple of masterminds where plants were big, and then that led to Wachuma, which led to Bufo, which led to Mexico, which led to ayahuasca, which has led to what I do now. And all of it was just, I can pinpoint that summer of 2020 just as like this moment when things just upturned in a huge way.
It's like the stock market just like going on a run, you know, like it really, up for you that first year of plant medicine. Like, what were some of the things that just changed for you? Like, what did it show you?
It showed me, I think, what I had always just thought was for other people, like really cool masterminds, and going to like Sedona to do these community meetups, and living in Mexico. I had these few moments where I'd just done a Bufo ceremony. I was in Mexico, and the shaman was like, go take, it was combo and Bufo, and I went, and I was sitting in the water kind of cleaning off and looking back at the shore, and I had this moment of like, I never thought I would be here. I looked at it on Instagram and saw the things, and like the knowing that I am creator mode, manifestation mode, and releasing the stories basically that we're in fight or flight. Like this constant just like holding in, fighting. I'm not a belligerent person. I wasn't a belligerent drunk. And the plant medicine showed me where I was just fighting life. Fighting myself, fighting my stories, fighting like the shame, fighting the kid. Like, in a sense, it's like so shut off from all of it that of course I'm never going to have that experience because I'm closed off. and the medicines opened me up to and the one that was the biggest for me was also the most uncomfortable, and it was Wachuma. And everyone's like, oh, it's a hug from your grandfather. It's like open heart and all this. And that was not my experience. It was the first like real ceremony that I had done since leaving AA and having this sobriety conversation that you just mentioned. Mm-hmm. And I was convinced I was an addict again in this ceremany. Like, I was like,
you had to face that.
I had to face all this. Like, I thought, like, I had almost exiled that part of me.
Right.
Like, I was like, it's not me anymore.
Right.
I'm good. I'm clear.
Uh-huh.
And Wachuma was like, not yet, you're not. And it showed up again in ayahuasca last year. Another layer of it, of this identity and this shame that I hold around it. The first one, Wachuma, was the identity. Like, I still thought I was an addict. You know, I had not had a drink in, 7-8 years. And I was still held on to this thing of like, I'm still an addict and I'm still out of control and I still can't trust myself. And so that Wachuma was real hard and dark. And coming out of it though, that was a true shedding of that identity.
Dude, you know what's interesting? It brings up a really good point for me. A teacher once told me, asked like, what are you afraid of? And I just said, well, I'm afraid of like just being alone and having nothing and being homeless and like losing everything. She's like, okay, well, that's going to happen then until you're not attached to that anymore. I'm like, a few years later, it happened. What is so crazy about what you just said is that when I'm on certain plant medicine journeys, similar, like going all these different types of medicines that I've sat with in the sacred traditions, I have had to become and accept I am all of it. Dark, light, homeless, rich, being the betrayed or the betrayer to being loved and the lover. Like, I've had to embrace and feel because multidimensionally you get to be shown that we actually are all one consciousness, experiencing itself multidimensionally through this beautiful hologram of a slowed down condensed vibration, which allows us to experience what we think is touch. So we're in this third dimension of what we call reality, but then there's, many other dimensions of reality. And I really believe that if someone hasn't faced, you got to face it to erase it. Because like if it's in there, like, oh no, I'm afraid I'm going to relapse. Okay. I'm afraid I'm going to like face something. Okay. Because it's in there still. It's in there. And it will come out in the shadow until we go in to face it. I think we're touching on something pretty profound.
Yeah. I love that acknowledgement that it has to be all of it. Because what we want to do as humans is like we hold these shame bodies or these, rejection wounds. And that version of us, like, stay over there.
That's right.
We want to exile it.
That's right.
And I had a really good friend of mine.
And it will creep up.
It'll live there in the shadows, just waiting for the moment when you're like, he's like, hey.
You haven't faced me yet.
And then it doesn't even have to be an employment. You could be in a relationship.
And
you could be in a work meeting. And you could be in some moment of just complete and utter peace and joy. And all of a sudden you're like, fuck, it's still there. Because you exiled it. You didn't love it. You didn't bring it in. You didn't, integration is great. Incorporate into the body all these versions of us. And so as we do that, as we stop exiling, you bring them in, and they're like inner child stuff. They just want love.
They just want to be seen.
Yeah, because really, what in those moments,
they want space to be, right? Because there was one time a few years ago, I kept. Death was knocking, like, death, look at death. And I'm like, no, I'll look at that when I'm later, down the road, maybe on my deathbed. But it kept coming up, whether it was in a dream or whether it was just in a slight thought, or maybe I'd look at one of my kids and like, oh my God, that could happen. But I was like attached and like didn't want to look at it. Yeah. And then, of course, then I start sitting with Bufo and start sitting with some other medicines that took me through that death process, that then realized that death and birth are just an illusion. And this is going pretty deep, but I got to experience beyond that that thought and realm of death, and now it just doesn't creep up anymore.
Totally.
It's cleared.
Yeah.
It was cleansed. Like, and who knows, there might be something else that knocks again, right? And there has been things for me to look at. Like another one was betrayal. I went to Peru last year and sat in darkness for several days on ayahuasca with a shaman in a leaky clay pit. And it was just one of the hardest things, because I had to go through my deepest fears of betrayal, but I had to get it out, right? So I just love the fact that you've gone within and had the courage to look at yourself. And, I'm curious, you mentioned shame. Talk to me about your process around healing shame.
So, what I've learned is that shame begins when we as children feel either humiliation or rejection for a basic need, when we're trying to meet a basic need.
Okay.
Me, for breathing. Like I would literally be walking through the hospital or the school, having maybe a small asthma attack, and kids would look at me and mimic an asthma attack. So humiliation around just, I'm trying to breathe.
You felt it early.
Yeah. I mean, really. And then, that creates difference. Like, why aren't you breathing like this? And I was a mouth breather. And so my tongue would kind of be like that, and kids would come up so these things, this shame started very early. And then, as I know now too, shame also dies in safe places, men's groups. It dies in ayahuasca ceremonies. It dies in these coaching containers, these safe places where we can say, I was really upset when that kid walked by me and was breathing weird in my ear. And just saying that and be witnessed in that, is that when shame dies. And so for me, shame, the repercussion, I guess, or the symptom of shame is this need to be validated and saved by everybody. Parents, girlfriends, bosses, drugs and alcohol, whatever it is. Like this need of, I am not okay as I am, so as soon as you tell me, and I'll go to relationships, as soon as you say, I love you to me, okay. I'm not shameful. But then there's another level to it of I back off. I'm not intimate. I'm not vulnerable, because I know, because being who I truly am and being seen like that, you're certainly going to leave me, which is, to me, a fate worse than death.
Would you say that when shame was more present in your body, that you would put yourself in situations where people would hurt you or have you feel shame? Would you create that?
I would create shameful cheating, lying, stealing, lying to my parents. I would create these shameful situations so that the shame could be essentially trying to fix the shame by saying, I'm going to create this shameful thing and I'm going to feel shameful about it, and then I need you to tell me that I'm okay and it's okay that you did that. And so just recreating all these shame loops in order for people to say, it's okay, don't worry about it.
How would you say it is now? What's different about it now with the work you've done?
Now is that I am very aware of how shame was running the show. How shame was I would think that girlfriend cheating on me, the girlfriends that have cheated on me, that's their response to something I already did. That wouldn't have happened if I hadn't created a shameful, chaotic thing. And then maybe it was a year and a half later, maybe it was 6 months later, maybe it was right away. And I make up that, no, now you rejected me. In my time of need, this shameful experience I'm having, I relapsed and you're going to leave me in this time of need, abandonment. And so
you were literally self-creating it.
I was just looking for all this validation.
Yeah.
And so now I have done so much clearing of the shame that it's so I can see it coming from a mile away. Wow. And just I see what I'm doing there. Wow. And I think that's where real healing happens is we start with reaction to an event, like a shameful event, a relapse, or whatever it is. And then we have to do damage control on that, and then that stops, and we hang out here.
Yeah.
And we're like, okay, another event, and we kind of hang out here. When you can get to here and see it coming before you go down that road, that's when you develop trust in your body, you develop safety in your body, you become embodied and you're grounded, because you're not constantly looking for that hypervigilance. You don't have that hypervigilance.
That's right. Of
constantly looking for threats, because you're not creating threats anymore.
And you're telling me that you've done all this healing in just 4 years, from the 2019 to now? Is this... This
has been, so yes, so much consciousness healing in those 4 years. Yeah. And I handled all the things I knew I needed to handle as a human being in recovery those
Yeah.
first 6 years.
Yeah.
Depression, anxiety.
Right.
Like those, and
You had a baseline, you had an anchor.
yeah, and that was when I decided that I needed something more from AA, because I was having repeated loops. Like, I just handled this depression 3 years ago, and here it is again.
I felt the same.
Yeah.
I would go to, like, anytime I would, people say, just go to a meeting. I'm like, okay, I'm feeling stressed. I got to go to a meeting. I'm feeling hurt. I got to go to a meeting.
Yeah.
So I was still looking. AA in recovery gave me a baseline for almost a decade. And it was 90 and 90, different programs, sponsoring, having sponsors. Man, it was beautiful. Anytime I hit a point, I had to go work the steps again or go to a meeting again,
Yeah.
right? And this fear of I don't want to relapse.
Yep.
And then also collecting my days. I got this many days. So it was like this. It almost is, and I love, if you're in recovery, like, stay in recovery until you're called not to. But, like, it is a bit programmy, and there's a kind of a cultish sense of it.
There's a little bit of a business model.
There's a bit of a business model in there, and there's a little bit of a history where we don't talk about Bill doing LSD for spiritual awakenings. We don't talk about that. We don't talk about Brune. No, we don't talk about Dr. Bill. But the point is that there was a time where it was just like, okay, I got to go within. I don't need to rush to a meeting. I don't have to rush to call my sponsor. What about the inner sponsor? What about the inner healer? What about the inner meeting? What about this inner? And that is what plant medicine called me out of. And it's just a new frequency. So anyone who's watching or listening around recovery, that's just my personal story of how it was called. And man, I'm just so grateful to be in this conversation with you and getting to know on a deeper level.
Same.
And before we wrap up, tell us a little bit about, what you're up to now and how people can find Sam Morris to connect with you.
Yeah, so what I'm up to now is this healing through consciousness. So one of the things about shame last year, I had cancer again last year.
Wow.
I was diagnosed on November 1st, post-Burning Man. I'd gotten the clear from the doctors, and they said, unless something major happens in that area, which is my jaw, you're good. And then after Burning Man last year, something major happened. And so I went to see two doctors, and they both looked at it and said, cancer. We need to get a biopsy done in the next 6 weeks.
Say that again, Sam. Sorry. I went to see two doctors.
Yeah. So I went to see two doctors beginning November, after I was like literally open sore bleeding from my mouth, in the same spot I had cancer in 2009, 2011. And they both looked at it and said, that is extremely ugly. That's cancer. It's back. We need to get a biopsy done, determine the stage and treatment plan. It'll be low level chemo and radiation. And I was like, this is not going to be chemo and radiation. So in that 6 weeks, what I did is I got back into my shame, back into my emotions, back into the trauma, back into the metaphysical stuff. Like, what is this cancer showing me? And it was one of the last levels of shame. And so I went to Costa Rica. We got invited to serve Bufo and sit with ayahuasca at the same retreat. And the last night of ayahuasca, I took 4 cups, the most ever taken. And I was faced with, again, that addict that I thought was gone. Still, it wasn't identified as an addict, but I held so much shame around that 20-year period of my life.
Yeah.
And this cancer...
It's programming.
Yeah. And this cancer was the purging of that shame. And so I got back from Costa Rica, got the biopsy done, cancer was gone.
You're telling me that you healed cancer by going within, metaphysically, using a plant medicine tool.
Yep.
And you heal cancer.
I healed my cells. I healed my body through emotional, conscious healing. And so that's what I do. That's what I help people do. I help people heal whatever it is they're coming up with, so they don't get to having cancer, so they don't get to having addiction, so they don't get to depression and suicide.
And I think what's important to acknowledge here is that any outward symptom we have, whether it's obesity, diabetes, cancer, anything, that if we go internally to the metaphysical, vibrational, frequency,
energetics,
shadow, energetics, generational things that we're carrying, and we can actually get in and actually release, purge, expel that and clear it.
Yep.
That's the message.
100%.
How can people find you?
Instagram's the best way, at Sam Gibbs Morris, Gibbs Morris, and the website is the same, www.samgibbsmorris.com.
I want to say, brother, I did not know all of this about you. I felt it. I felt your sense of depth, your authenticity, your powerful demeanor, right? You have a powerful energy, and you have a sense of humility and love. But hearing your story, I just feel so much more enriched and alive and inspired. And I have more wisdom and understanding just knowing your story. And now I want to send as many people your way as possible who are struggling with some of the illnesses that they think just happened to them.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for your courage. Thank you so much for your sacredness. The courage, I want to say, the fact that you're going within and saying, no, I'm going to go within myself to heal this versus, okay, I'm going to go do the chemo. I'm going to go on your paradigm of consciousness. No, I'm going to find my paradigm of consciousness to heal. I just applaud that, man. And just so much respect to you, brother.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for that reflection. Seeing me the way you do.
Yeah.
It's so great to know you in the community and creating this space. Thank you so much for the space to come here where I can come here and share this story and the safe spaces you create in the world. Like, you are up to amazing things, and I deeply, deeply honor
Thank you.
what you're doing. And it's an absolute pleasure to walk this path alongside of you.
Reflection is the same. Aho.
Aho, my bro.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for joining us today on the Going Within podcast. The Going Within podcast is sponsored by Within Center. Within is a ceremonial psychedelic-assisted wellness center in the heart of Austin, Texas. Discover more about our transformative practices at within.center. If you enjoyed this episode, we kindly invite you to follow us and share your thoughts with a review. Going Within is hosted by David Naylor, production led by Patrick Stanger, and filming and production by Rare Media. Please note the statements made on Going Within have not undergone evaluation by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. At Within, we strongly recommend consulting your healthcare provider for personalized guidance on the diagnosis and treatment of any disease or condition.